My husband, Yan, served in the army for 15 years. On the day he returned, he brought back a woman, along with 2 sons and a daughter. Her eldest son was, shockingly, 3 months older than my own twin son and daughter. However, I wasn't the least bit angry, because in this marriage, who had truly outmaneuvered whom, and who had suffered the greater loss, was a conclusion yet to be drawn. My husband returned to the capital with his troops, and went first to the palace to report to the emperor. He had his men escort the woman and her 4 children back to the marquise's mansion. No one informed me. Instead, the grand dame of the mansion and my mother-in-law were waiting joyfully at the main gate, welcoming the 4 of them into the residence with great fanfare. Their warmth and intimacy made it obvious this was not their first meeting, so it turned out the entire mansion knew of their existence. Only my children and I had been kept in the dark. The day after my husband and I were married, he left with the army. In the 15 years of our marriage, we had been intimate only once, on our wedding night. It was on that night that I conceived my children, fraternal twins, a son and a daughter in one birth. Thinking back now, it was clear my husband had already secretly conceived a child with that woman, before he even married me. I felt a surge of relief. Had I not borne a child from that single night? After 15 years of childlessness, my fate would have been either demotion from wife to concubine, or outright divorce, though the truth was unbelievable and humiliating. I put on a brave face for my children. I acted as if nothing had happened, chatting and laughing with them during lunch in my courtyard as usual. They didn't mention the matter either. It was as if the sudden appearance of the woman and her 4 children never happened. After the meal, a messenger from the grand dame and my mother-in-law arrived. They didn't even deign to come themselves, nor did they intend for that woman and her children to pay their respects to me, the official main wife. The messenger was imperious and condescending. Lady Liu and the Marquis were childhood sweethearts, inseparable for over 20 years. If you hadn't interfered, she would have been the Marquise's one and only official wife. The Marquis served in the army for 15 years, and for 15 years, Lady Liu took care of him at the border, personally attending to his every need. Her contributions are immense. She even bore him 2 sons and a daughter, making her a great benefactor to the Marquise's family. Her contribution to this mansion is far greater than yours, a mere merchant's daughter who only occupies the title of the main wife. The Marquis has given his orders. Although you have spent the last 15 years enjoying a life of luxury in the capital, you have failed to fulfill your duties as a wife. The mansion has not prospered under your management. You are untalented, virtueless, and of lowly merchant birth. You should have been divorced. However, the Marquis is mindful that even if you have no great merits, you have put in the effort, and you did bear him a son and a daughter. For this reason, he will not touch your position as the main wife for now. But today, the Marquis will petition the Emperor to marry Lady Liu as an equal wife. From now on, you and Lady Liu will be of equal standing in this household. Her children will also be legitimate sons and daughters of the Marquis. The eldest son is 3 months older than yours, making him the legitimate eldest son and the future heir to the marquisate. If you know what is good for you, behave yourself and don't covet what isn't yours. There will still be a place for you and your children in this mansion. But if you harbor resentment and cause trouble, don't blame the Marquise's family for not tolerating you. The messenger spoke through clenched teeth, her eyes blazing, as if I were a heinous criminal who had not only hindered the mansion's prosperity, but also usurped the position that belonged to the Marquise's true love, a useless dog in the manger. But it was the grand dame herself who had shamelessly traveled all the way to my family's home in the south to beg for my hand in marriage. When we first met, I didn't even know a down on its luck marquisate of Yongchang existed in the capital. She had told me herself that the Marquis's family was large and owned numerous businesses. However, the men of the family were either scholars or soldiers for generations, and the women they married were all from official families. They lacked a woman skilled in commerce to manage their many enterprises. The grand dame had sworn that the mansion didn't look down on my merchant background. She promised that as soon as I married in, I would be given the authority to manage the household, and all of the family's businesses would be handed over to me. I believed her foolish words, which is why I eagerly came to the capital, with dozens of ships loaded with my dowry and millions of silver taels to fill their financial holes. I casually picked at my ear, treating her words as nothing more than air. After delivering her threats, the messenger left. My son, Shi Feng, was as impassive as I was. It was as if no one had come, as if no one had just spouted such nonsense. He didn't even lift his eyes from the travelogue in his hands, a faint smile playing on his lips, likely having reached an interesting part. Clearly, he paid no mind to the messenger or her words. I stroked my son's head and smiled in satisfaction. This is how my children should be, unaffected by worthless people, never letting them spoil their happiness. My daughter, Chiya, however, was another story. She spat on the ground and cursed. What kind of creature is that? A dog borrowing its master's ferocity, daring to be so arrogant. Mother, are you just going to let them bully us like this? I had raised my daughter to be straightforward and a little spoiled. She couldn't stand being wronged in the slightest. I gently patted her hand and reassured her with a smile. Don't worry, what is ours, no one can take away. What a joke. Did they think that while Qian was enjoying his love affair at the border for 15 years and managed to become a logistics general, I had spent that same time in the capital with my ships of dowry and millions in silver just to fill their coffers and be a decorative madam of the Marquise's mansion? Doing nothing else? In this marriage, who had truly outmaneuvered, whom was far from decided. Underscore 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 re underscore 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 underscore. The war on the northern border had been a protracted affair dragging on with skirmishes and standstills for decades. Last month, a great victory was won. Our army marched to the enemy's capital, forcing them into total surrender. They ceded over a dozen cities and paid immense reparations in gold, silver, and jewels. From then on, the enemy nation would bow to our dynasty. They were now a destitute country, unlikely to pose a threat for at least a century. This was a monumental achievement for the current emperor, one that would be recorded in the annals of history. The emperor was overjoyed. He declared a general amnesty and planned a grand banquet in the palace to celebrate the victory and reward the meritorious. All imperial relatives, noble families, court officials, and soldiers, with military rank or merit in the capital, were invited to attend the banquet with their families to witness this glorious moment. Not long after lunch, two groups of people arrived from the palace. One, from the Ministry of Rights, went to the Grand Dame's courtyard. The other, from the Empress's palace, came to mine. Both were here to summon the family members of the Marquise's mansion to the afternoon banquet. As soon as the palace envoys left, the Grand Dame's courtyard burst into activity. They sent someone over, demanding that I immediately procure court attire for Lady Lu and her 3 children. I refused directly, saying I had no time. They then had the audacity to try and snatch jewelry from my rooms. My maids and guards, all skilled in martial arts, tied them up and sent them straight to the authorities, reporting them as rogue servants attempting to rob their mistress. They wailed and cried, claiming they were only following the Grand Dame's orders, and begged for mercy. I ignored them. These must have been new servants who didn't yet know my temperament. If I let them off this time, there would be a next time. A trip to the magistrate's office would teach them, who in this mansion they could not afford to provoke. I knew that at the Yamen they would surely implicate the Grand Dame. She would then have to intervene, claiming it was all a family misunderstanding to get them released. Since it wasn't a capital crime, the authorities would give the Marquise's mansion face and let them go. This sort of thing happened frequently when I first married into the family. Back then, everyone in the mansion, the various uncles, aunts, cousins, and even the relatives of the Grand Dame and my mother-in-law, assumed that a merchant's daughter from the south, married into the capital without any support, would be easy to bully and take advantage of. Every time they came to ask for money, and I refused, they would turn ugly, not only trying to snatch things by force, but also resorting to violence. But with my family's wealth, what kind of help couldn't I hire? The maids and guards I brought from the south were all formidable fighters. Those relatives were either injured or crippled by my guards before being sent to the authorities on charges of robbery. Not only that, but on the way to the yamen, I had people beat gongs and drums, crying out my grievances all along the way. Soon, the entire capital knew that the Marquise's family was trying to steal their new daughter-in-law's dowry. After several such incidents, the family and their relatives finally stopped trying to get their hands on my dowry. Perhaps too much time had passed, and the Grand Dame and my mother-in-law had forgotten their past lessons. Sure enough, they stormed into my courtyard themselves, berating me with fury. They accused me of disrespecting my elders and my mother-in-law and threatened to use family discipline on me. But my maids and highly paid guards were not to be trifled with. Furthermore, over the years under my management, those in the mansion who listened to me lived well and received preferential treatment. Those who didn't were either sold off or, if they couldn't be sold, had their allowances cut and their meals reduced. Over time, they had no choice but to bow to me. As a result, no one in the entire mansion dared to truly lay a hand on me. Offending the Grand Dame and my mother-in-law might earn you a scolding or a punishment, but offending me meant losing the income that fed your family. I shrugged nonchalantly. Everything in my courtyard was purchased with my own dowry. Not a single penny came from the Marquise's mansion. You can ask anyone in the capital, there is no precedent for a husband's family forcibly taking a daughter-in-law's dowry. If you disagree, we can take it to the magistrate and argue it out. The Grand Dame trembled with rage but was powerless. What could she do? There were no men in the house to take charge. This entire large family still depended on me for their livelihood, and I wasn't like the daughters raised in noble families, who revered their elders as if they were heaven itself. My philosophy was simple. I treat well those who treat me well. For those who don't, I won't offer a pleasant expression. I had grown up in wealth, spoiled by my parents and brother. It made no sense for me to get married, pour my own money into supporting a large family, and still have to suffer their abuse. I would not agree to it, and neither would my parents or my brother. Finally, the Grand Dame gritted her teeth and said hatefully, "Ishi, your arrogance won't last much longer. We've had enough of you. When Yaner returns, you will no longer be the one in charge here, and you will suffer for it. Yaner has earned great military merit this time, and will soon be rewarded with 10,000 taels of gold from the Emperor. Our mansion will no longer have to rely on your filthy money. Just you wait to be divorced. Let's go." The group that had stormed in so mightily left just as mightily. They knew full well that I was not one to take a loss. I was wealthy, but my money didn't grow on trees. Without mutual benefit, only a fool would give selflessly. I was from a merchant family, and I was just that pragmatic. When my children and I were ready and arrived at the mansion's gate, we saw the Grand Dame and my mother-in-law with the woman and her 4 children, all gathered around the mansion's carriage, laughing and about to board. Seeing me, the faces of the Grand Dame and my mother-in-law immediately turned cold. The Grand Dame said with displeasure, "We didn't call for you. Why are you joining the crowd? You've been to the palace countless times over the years. Missing this one won't cost you a pound of flesh, poor Shinner." And her children suffered so much at the border to finally return to the capital. Now is the time for them to see the world. I've decided that for today's victory banquet, they will represent the Marquise's main wife and legitimate children in the palace. You should stop being an eyesore and take your children back to your courtyard. Before I could say anything, my outspoken daughter couldn't hold back and retorted on the spot. "Grand Dame, have you gone senile? You actually want to take some country bumpkin you picked up from God knows where, and her bastard children to the palace to represent our family's honor? Are you not afraid of the Marquise's mansion becoming the laughingstock of the capital?" The Grand Dame was fuming. Me mother-in-law, who usually presented a frail, willow-like image due to her poor health, suddenly became sharp-tongued. She scolded my daughter. When elders are speaking, you have no place to talk. No well-bred young lady in the entire capital would dare to contradict an elder like this. A daughter raised by a merchant woman truly lacks refinement. Furthermore, how can you call your own half-siblings bastards? They are your older brother and your younger brother and sisters. If you dare to speak such nonsense in public again, I'll tear your mouth apart. It is a good thing the Marquise has more than just you two, or our century-old Marquisate would truly have no heirs. When facing the 3 illegitimate children, the Grand Dame and my mother-in-law were all smiles, playing the part of loving elders. But when they faced my children, their faces were filled with criticism and harshness, finding fault in everything. When my children were younger, they would feel sad and hurt for not receiving their elders' love and affection. Later, I told them not to care too much about what others think. People who don't like us won't like us no matter how much we try to please them. It is enough to keep a distance. There is no need to curry favor with them. Not all elders are good people, and not all elders deserve our respect. Over time, my children came to accept this. They no longer yearned for the affection of the mansion's elders, maintaining only a superficial level of respect and courtesy. Behind their backs, they avoided them whenever possible, out of sight, out of mind. Aunt, please calm down. It is not worth getting angry over people like them. The two-faced mother-in-law patted the Grand Dame's back a few times before turning a sharp glare on me. Yue is only 14. If someone hadn't taught her, she would never have said that her half-siblings were bastards. Yi Shi, it is you who has failed to raise your daughter properly. As your mother-in-law, I have the right to punish you today. I will establish the rules of this mansion. You will not go to the palace. I am punishing you and your children to 3 days of confinement in your courtyard. After 3 days, we will see if your behavior has improved before deciding whether to release you. If you disobey, I will certainly report you to my son when he returns. Hearing this, my daughter was furious and about to argue, but I held her back. I said, "Mother-in-law, what big words just now. An envoy from the palace came specifically to my courtyard to deliver a verbal decree. They said that in recognition of my family, the Yi family, and my own support for the national treasury and border provisions over the past decade, donating countless gold and silver, I have a share of the credit for today's victory. Therefore, the Empress specifically sent someone to summon me and my children to the palace for the celebration. Are you, mother-in-law, greater than the Empress? Can you disregard her decree and place me under confinement? Mother-in-law, are you getting senile? Or do you think you can use my husband's meager military merits to defy the current Empress and disrespect her imperial decree? If word of this gets out, people might think it is the Marquis who has grown arrogant with his success and no longer respects the imperial family." This accusation was a heavy one. I didn't believe these 2 old witches would dare to confine me now. Insolence. Yi Shi, listen to what you are saying. My mother-in-law cried, her lips turning purple with rage. Audacious, the Grand Dame shouted. Yi Shi, don't you dare speak such nonsense. When did our mansion ever disrespect the Empress or defy her decree? You should know what can and cannot be said. Don't bring disaster upon our family with your words. If you want to go to the palace, then go. Just don't feel humiliated when Yanner publicly asks the Emperor to marry Liur as an equal wife. Don't blame us for not saving face for you then. I shrugged and spread my hands. You are taking a pack of illegitimate children to embarrass yourselves, and you don't feel humiliated. What do I have to be humiliated about? The Grand Dame shot me a fierce glare, already grinding her teeth in anger but unable to find a retort. In the 15 years I had been in the mansion, they had learned my temperament well. If they made me unhappy, they would be even more unhappy. I could only be placated, never wronged. This was a lesson they had learned through many losses over the past 15 years. They always thought that once the Marquis returned, they would have someone to control me. Unfortunately for them, they were likely to be disappointed. You must be the elder sister, a woman dressed plainly but neatly said, approaching me with a smile. The children and I just arrived at the mansion today and have been busy settling into our courtyard. We haven't had a chance to visit you yet. I thought you might come to see me first. At the border, the Marquis often spoke of you, saying that you managed the mansion in the capital. Although the results weren't great, you put in the effort even if there were no great achievements. He asked me to get along with you when I returned to the capital. I hope you can be of one heart with me and the Marquis, and not take your anger out on him, grandmother-in-law, just because they treat me and my children better. They are only trying to make up for the dozen years of hardship we endured at the border. The thinly veiled taunts in her saccharine words were not lost on me. First, she was blaming me for not being magnanimous enough to visit her first. What a joke. It was always the concubine who paid respects to the main wife, never the other way around. I would never do something that lowered my own status second. She was mocking me for holding the position of the main wife and managing the household, yet doing a poor job of it. If I truly did such a poor job, why didn't they take back the management authority and do it themselves? Oh, they had tried, only to come back crying and begging me to take charge again after just a few days. Third, she was flaunting how she and her children were more favored, trying to make me jealous. How laughable. With a family as wealthy as a nation and personal assets that 10 marquises' mansions couldn't match, would I be jealous of a group of paupers? Before I could retort, my impetuous daughter spoke up. Where did this village woman come from, trying to claim sisterhood with my mother? I can see the wrinkles at the corners of your eyes are about to droop to your chin. Standing next to our 50-year-old grand dame, you look like a pair of sisters. You are clearly older and uglier than my mother. So how dare you call her elder sister? Also, you said you thought my mother would visit you first. Pray tell, in what capacity and with what etiquette should my mother visit you? As the main wife visiting a concubine, an outside mistress, or a shameless harlot from an illicit affair? My daughter's merciless words stunned everyone present. What she said was true. For the past 15 years, I had lived a life of pampered luxury in the capital, eating well, drinking well, and focusing on my appearance with an endless supply of cosmetics. When I stood next to my 14-year-old daughter, people said we looked like sisters. Liu Shi, on the other hand, had endured the harsh conditions of the border, given birth to 3 children, and had to care for both her man and her kids. And my husband, Qi Yan, was not a man who could endure hardship. His military pay and the money sent from the mansion each month were not even enough for him and his cronies to eat and drink with. Their family of 4 had lived a frugal life, so she naturally couldn't compare to me, who had been coddled in the capital. You shut up. You are not allowed to insult my mother. My mother said that the one who is not loved is the concubine. If it weren't for you, my mother would have married my father long ago and been enjoying a life of luxury in the capital. A boy who looked simple-minded and was half a head shorter than my son said angrily. My daughter sneered. If that is the case, and your father and mother are so in love, why did he marry my mother in the first place? And how did he end up having me and my brother with her? It has been 15 years in all that time. Why didn't father divorce my mother and marry yours, then bring you all back to the capital to enjoy a good life? Or does father think that you and your mother don't deserve to live well? My daughter was my perfect mouthpiece. That is not it. Father said that today he will request an imperial decree to marry my mother as an equal wife. Then my mother will be a main wife of equal standing to yours, and he might even demote your mother to a concubine. I will be the heir of the Marquise's mansion, and you will all have to live under my thumb. PH. My father also said that if I really don't like you all, he can just send you far away where I can't see you. He said he'd at least let you have enough to eat and not drive you to your deaths. But now I see you don't deserve my kindness at all. Just you, wait. When I become the heir, the first thing I'll do is send you all to a country estate to fend for yourselves. I looked at the red-faced boy, who was older than my own son, and almost burst out laughing. So I should thank your father for his mercy, and you for sparing our lives. Enough. The grand dame stomped her cane. Yishi, what are you doing arguing with children? If you want to go to the palace, find your own carriage. The mansion's carriage cannot fit so many people. With that, she let her maids help her step onto the back of a groom bent over on the ground and climbed into the carriage. My mother-in-law glanced at me, took the hand of a little girl beside her, and was about to get on. But after pulling for a moment, she realized the girl wasn't moving. She turned to see the girl, who looked only a year or two younger than my daughter, staring intently at her. "Yanner, what are you looking at?" my mother-in-law asked. The girl snapped back to reality and gave my daughter a sweet, shallow smile. "You must be the elder sister. Your clothes and jewelry are so beautiful. I've never seen anything so pretty at the border." Her eyes were filled with envy. If her hand hadn't been held, she might have stepped forward to touch them. However, the greed and unwillingness mixed in with that envy did not escape my notice. My daughter took an instant dislike to her as well. She lifted her head and looked down at her. "You like them? Then have your mother buy them for you. This entire outfit, from clothes to jewelry, is worth over 1,000 silver taels, all bought for me by my mother with her dowry. Oh, I forgot. Your mother eloped without a proper marriage. A woman who elopes is a concubine. She has no dowry." With a hump from her nostrils, my daughter lifted her chin and walked proudly across the street. A carriage, far more spacious and magnificent than the Marquise's, was already waiting there. It was emblazoned with the mark of the Great Shang's #1 imperial merchant. This title had been personally bestowed upon my family, the Yi family, by the emperor himself. The emblem was also personally granted by the emperor. I waved to the grand dame and my mother-in-law. "My family's carriage is here to pick us up. We'll be on our way." As for the Marquise's dilapidated carriage, I had no interest in riding in it. It was a magnificent banquet. The entrance to the palace was bustling with people, and carriages from all the noble houses were parked outside. The higher one's status, the closer their carriage was parked to the palace gates. The Yi family carriage, bearing the seal of the Great Shang's #1 imperial merchant, passed through unimpeded and parked, right behind those of the imperial princes. It wasn't that our status was higher, but that the various princes and noble families gave face to the Yi family. As soon as my sister-in-law and I stepped out of the carriage, a large crowd of noble ladies and their daughters gathered around us. They greeted us warmly, their faces sincere. My son and daughter bid us farewell and quickly joined the princes and princesses waiting at the palace entrance. My sister-in-law and I, surrounded by the noblewoman, strolled leisurely through the palace grounds. Being surrounded and addressed as Madame Marquise was quite satisfying. I occasionally glanced over at the group from the Marquise's mansion, led by the Grand Dame, who were being pointed at and scorned. The esteemed Marquise's family, how could they bring a group of servants into the palace? On such a joyous occasion, they couldn't even bother to dress properly. Is this a sign of disrespect? In these peaceful and prosperous times, aren't they afraid their shabby appearance will offend His Majesty? They're not servants. That is the illegitimate daughter of the Liu family who ran away with a man. The rumor back then was that she eloped with a poor scholar. I never thought she had actually hooked up with the Marquis of Yongchang. Indeed, I heard her eldest son is a few months older than Madame Yi's children. So she was already pregnant before she ran away. How shameless. I heard the Liu family has already removed her from the family registry and disowned her. Even now that the Marquis has returned with military honors, the Liu family wants nothing to do with them. The Liu family's business is all tied to the Yi family. How could they sacrifice the greater good for something so small? She is just an illegitimate daughter after all. This Marquis of Yongchang is truly dishonorable. Lady Yi has been so virtuous in the capital, doing so many good deeds, taking care of the entire family by herself for all these years, relying on her own family's support to feed the hundreds of people in that mansion. And now, the moment he gains a little merit, he brazenly parades his mistress and illegitimate children around. Isn't this a slap in the face to his official wife? He doesn't intend to leave her any face at all. If you ask me, Lady Yi is just too gentle. If it were me, I would have scratched that vixen's face to ribbons and driven those bastard children out of the capital long ago. Why would I give them the face to appear before the emperor? No matter what, I only recognize Yi Shi as the Madam of Yongchang. From now on, in all social matters, If it is not Lady Yi representing them, my family, the house of Count Yongyi, will sever all ties with the Marquis of Yongchang. Me too. I will instruct my children not to associate with those illegitimate children. A crooked beam will cast a crooked shadow. Who knows what kind of children a woman who elopes without a proper marriage can raise? Count me in. The Prime Minister's family also stands with Lady Yi. Those children, who had never seen such a world, looked at the lavishly dressed people before them. But these people looked at them with disdain, showing them no kindness. They huddled behind the adults, their faces filled with fear. The more people sympathized with me, the more they scorned the members of the Marquise's household, their words growing increasingly disrespectful. The faces of the Marquise's family turned ugly. They especially couldn't stand seeing me being praised and surrounded by the crowd. Their eyes, glaring at me, looked as if they were about to pop out. Liu Shi, in particular, looked at me with a gaze full of resentment and jealousy. She probably felt that everything I had now should have been hers. They must have never anticipated this situation. They couldn't understand it. The Marquis had kept his mistress and illegitimate children at the border a secret for so long. Today, the Marquis and Liu Shi's group had even entered the capital separately. Liu Shi and her children had only been in the mansion for a short while. So how did the entire capital now know that the Marquis of Yongchang had kept a mistress and had illegitimate children at the border? They even knew that his eldest son was a few months older than my children. Furthermore, the Marquis was a man of merit, so people should have been more tolerant. A husband and wife separated for over a decade, it wasn't unusual for him to have a mistress. In the noble circles of the capital, this was not uncommon. There were even cases where a mistress was promoted to a concubine, or even became the main wife. So why were people so indignant now, all taking my side and condemning the Marquise's family? When did everyone become so meddlesome? Besides, who the Marquis kept as a mistress or promoted to be his wife shouldn't have affected anyone else. Why were they showing the Marquise's family such disrespect? While the Marquise's family was still bewildered, the banquet began. Everyone took their seats according to their status. Because of the Marquise's position as a logistics general, his family was seated in the first row, towards the middle back, just close enough to see the Emperor's general outline. Unsurprisingly, beside Qian sat the Grand Dame, his mother, and Liu Shi with her 4 children. As for me, I knew my place and didn't squeeze in with them. It also saved me from being pointed at and treated like a spectacle. Even with a quick glance, I could see the hateful stares from the Grand Dame and my mother-in-law. As for Qian, I had expected him to be as displeased with me as the others. But surprisingly, there was a flicker of amazement in his eyes when he looked at me. What was that about? Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Liu Shi pinch his arm hard. I found it amusing. The Yi family's seats, though in the second row, were closer to the front than the Marquise's, right behind the imperial princes. My parents were traveling, so my brother and sister-in-law had naturally saved seats for me and my children. From here, I could see the expressions of the Emperor and Empress on the main dais much more clearly. After the Emperor gave a rousing speech, the rewarding of merits began. The highest honors, of course, went to the Grand Marshal, the military strategist, and the generals and soldiers who fought on the front lines. Some were enfoffed as princes or marquises, while some soldiers were promoted to generals. In addition to the promotions in status, there were rewards of fertile lands, mansions, gold, and jewels. When the official announcer read out the name of Qi Yan, Marquis of Yongchang, from the list, Qi Yan eagerly stepped forward and knelt before the official had even begun to list his accomplishments. Your Majesty, this subject wishes to use his military merits to request a boon. The Emperor was in an excellent mood today and smilingly granted his permission. Speak, my dear subject. Then, in front of all the meritorious officials and their families, Qi Yan began to recount his hardships at the border over the years. He spoke of his childhood love for Liu Shi, how they had known and loved each other, and how he was later forced by his parents to marry me. Then he described how Liu Shi, disregarding her reputation, followed him to the border, caring for him day and night for over a decade and bearing him children. Truly a great and arduous service. He was grateful for Lu Shi's sacrifices and now wanted to use his military merits to ask the emperor to grant them a marriage, allowing her to enter his household as an equal wife. I knew Qi Yan's plan. He was aware that eloping with Lu Shi and having a son older than his legitimate heir would be scandalous. To give Lu Shi and her children some face in the capital, he was publicly requesting an imperial marriage decree. First, it would show the capital's nobility how much he valued her. To disrespect Lu Shi would be to disrespect him, the Marquise of Yongchang. Second, with an imperial decree, others would have to consider the imperial family's face and would no longer dare to comment on Lu Shi's status or her children's parentage. Qi Yan was completely lost in his own schemes and his deep affection for Lu Shi, entirely failing to notice that the more he spoke, the darker the emperor's face became. You see, over the years, under my brothers and my management, the Yi family had become the wealthiest in the Shang dynasty. However, my brother and I knew that to maintain wealth for 3 generations, we needed the backing of the powerful and in the entire capital, who was more powerful than the emperor. So my brother made a bold move. Through the empress's introduction, he gained an audience with the emperor. He not only offered half of the Yi family's fortune, but also gave the emperor a 60% share of the profits from all of the Yi family's businesses to fill the national treasury. The Yi family was vast. Even with only 40% of the profits, it was enough for the entire clan to live lavishly for generations. Too much wealth, if not protected, could become a curse. From then on, no matter how much money the Yi family made, the emperor made more. The entire Yi family proudly became workers for the emperor. To protect his interests, the emperor naturally protected the Yi family's interests. Not only that, but the emperor also granted the Yi family operating rights in many sensitive industries. Because of the Yi family's astuteness and generosity, the emperor personally bestowed upon us the title of Great Shang's #1 imperial merchant. Thankfully, my brother did not become arrogant because of this connection with the emperor. Instead, he understood that a monopoly would eventually lead to disaster. So for many of the industries granted by the emperor, we willingly cooperated with other merchants, sharing the profits. We worked even more diligently, achieving great success, not only within the Shang dynasty, but also establishing the Shang Merchant Guild, opening shops in nearly every country accessible to the Shang. Not only did our Yi family prosper, but we also helped other Shang businesses to prosper. For the past decade, the business environment in the Shang dynasty had been the best in its history, with prosperity everywhere. As a result, the national treasury was full, resources were abundant, and the soldiers at the border never lacked for supplies, which naturally led to victories. Of course, this wasn't solely the Yi family's doing. Ultimately, it was the result of the emperor's wise and capable rule. Originally, the major imperial merchants were to be rewarded today, with our Yi family at the top of the list. However, to avoid giving the impression that the Shang army was funded by merchants, which would steal the thunder from the emperor and the Ministry of War, and because the royal family was wary of merchants getting too close to court officials, leading to corruption, merchants were rarely given a chance to be in the spotlight at court. So, the rewards for the imperial merchants were to be mentioned briefly at the end. Even so, the emperor was well aware of the Yi family's contributions to the Shang dynasty, and knew that although I had married into the Marquise's mansion, I still managed about 30% of the Yi family's businesses. Over the years, I had been a philanthropist in the capital, nearly exhausting my dowry to build an excellent reputation. Qi Yan himself was mediocre, known in his youth as a good-for-nothing. His promotion to a logistics general in the army was largely due to my and the Yi family's influence. Whenever there was an urgent need for supplies on the front lines, the Grand Marshal or the strategist wouldn't first request them from the emperor or the Ministry of War. Instead, they would send a fast horse to the Yi family's various business outposts. The Yi family would then give top priority to the military's needs, never daring to delay. Therefore, almost all the top generals and commanders gave face to the Yi family. As the Yi family's son-in-law, Qi Yan naturally received preferential treatment. Unfortunately, He had originally just gone to gain some experience to get a sinecure at the Ministry of War upon his return, when he was suddenly promoted by the Grand Marshal to a general in charge of supplies. He thought it was because the army valued his status as the Marquis of Yongchang and his own talent. He did not feel he was benefiting from the Yi family's influence. Now, this titular generalship had gone to his head. Not only had he kept a mistress and fathered a brood of illegitimate children, but he now wanted to publicly request an equal wife to humiliate me. If the emperor agreed, it would show his disregard for me and the Yi family, which would undoubtedly dishearten us. If the emperor refused, it would be a public rebuke to a meritorious official on a joyous day, which would also be awkward. So, of course, the emperor's face was dark. Fortunately, the empress whispered a few words in his ear. The emperor's lips curved into a smile. He must have come up with a good solution. Then, the emperor made his announcement. He agreed to Qi Yan's request to use his military merits to marry Lu Xinxin as an equal wife. At the same time, he bestowed upon me the title of a first-rank titled Dame and decreed that Qi Yan could never divorce me unless I voluntarily requested it. He also named my son, Qi Feng, as the heir to the marquisate of Yongchang and my daughter as Princess Lian. After that, there was no mention of any financial rewards. The emperor waved his hand, hastily dismissed Qi Yan, and moved on to the next person. What audacity he had, wasting everyone's time. Qi Yan was stunned. Was that it? 15 years at the border, and all he got was an equal wife? The expressions on the faces of the Marquise's family were indescribably complex. It seemed they had gotten what they wanted, but not entirely. Unexpectedly, the emperor then, with a grand gesture, enfoffed my brother as the Marquis of Xingguo. Although it came with no real power or fiefdom, it meant that his descendants would no longer be barred from taking the imperial examinations due to their merchant status. This was a delightful surprise for both my brother and me. After the awards ceremony, it was time for feasting and entertainment. Several princes and princesses, along with some young nobles from the capital, performed to liven things up. Both my son and daughter had performances. My son competed with others in calligraphy on the spot, composing a poem praising the current era of peace and prosperity, which was very fitting for the occasion. He was poised and brilliant, earning praise from everyone. My daughter's sword dance and zither performance were unparalleled among the noble ladies of the capital, winning thunderous applause and earning her the title of the first daughter of the capital. The members of the Marquise's household stared in disbelief. It seemed they had paid little attention to my children, perhaps disliking them because they disliked my ways. They had never imagined my children could be so outstanding. The brilliance and talent of my children only served to highlight the cowardice and pettiness of the illegitimate children cowering beside Qi Yan and Liu Shi. The emperor and empress publicly praised me for raising my children so well. The three of us had stolen the show. When the banquet ended, the empress invited me to her palace for a visit. I took the opportunity to request an imperial decree for a divorce. The Marquise's mansion no longer held any meaning for me. My greatest value in marrying into the mansion was using the status of the Marquise's wife to attend various banquets and get to know almost all the powerful figures in the capital. In my first few years in the capital, I was known as the Lady of 1,000 Charities. Using my substantial dowry, I catered to the tastes of the noble ladies and even selflessly helped several noble families out of tight spots. Through my schemes, I unintentionally did the Empress's family a great favor. After a few years of careful management, I was able to establish a connection with the Empress, and we eventually bound our interests together. With that, I had firmly established my footing in the circle of the capital's noblewomen. My main purpose in marrying into the capital was to find a reliable backer for the Yi family. The Marquise's mansion was merely a convenient stepping stone for my status. Now that the Yi family's backing was secure, and we even had a marquisate of our own, I no longer needed to use the title of the Marquise's wife to network. The marquisate of Yongchang had become the laughingstock of the capital, and I had no intention of forcing myself to face that rotten group of people every day. The last few marquises of Yongchang had been mediocre and extravagant. Furthermore, the Grand Dame had used underhanded means to become the Marquise's wife, and then arranged for her two-faced niece, my current mother-in-law, to push aside my father-in-law's original fiancée and take her place. This was so the aunt and niece could empty the already declining mansion's coffers to support their own maternal family. They say an unwise wife can ruin 3 generations. The Marquise's mansion was rotten to the core beyond saving. I didn't want to waste my life in that mansion any longer. The only thing of value to me in that mansion was the hereditary title. If my son could have a better status and future, I wouldn't care for it. But for now, before a better option presented itself, I still wanted my son to be the heir. Now my son was the officially appointed heir, and my daughter was a princess. They both had status and would not be judged or discriminated against for having a divorced mother. On the contrary, staying in the mansion would only tarnish their reputations. I had a plan. I would set up a princess's residence for my daughter in the capital, and after the divorce, she and I would live there. My son would be sent to Hengshan Academy to study for next year's imperial examinations. In short, I did not want to live under the same roof as the people of the Marquise's mansion anymore. It was late when I returned to the mansion. To my surprise, Qian was waiting in my room, his face dark. I was puzzled before I could speak. He launched his attack. He said, "Go and request the Emperor and Empress to revoke Qifeng's status as heir and appoint a Jin instead." I snorted. On what grounds? On the grounds that Shinner accompanied me at the border for 15 years, and on the grounds that Jinner and the others suffered for over a decade at the border. You and your children have enjoyed a life of luxury in the capital for over a decade. You owe them this. You should compensate them. I laughed instead of getting angry. How ridiculous. Do you think I need to be married to you to enjoy a life of luxury in the capital? I could marry any noble son or commoner in this city and live in comfort for the rest of my life without having to endure over a decade of widowhood while my husband is alive. I don't owe anyone anything. Not only do I not owe anyone in this mansion, but it is this mansion that has relied on me to maintain its dignity for over a decade. It is the mansion that owes me. I haven't asked you for repayment, and yet you want to take my son's rightful place. Qian was furious. Don't be ungrateful for a merchant's daughter like you to marry into a marquise's mansion, and become the madam is a blessing. Don't be unappreciative. If you refuse to give up the heir's position, then hand over the management of the household and all its businesses. Was there such a good deal? I couldn't have been happier. I immediately had Gigi fetch the management tokens, the keys to the storerooms, and all the ledgers and placed them in front of Qian. Qian was momentarily stunned to see me hand over power so readily. He must have thought I would be reluctant to give up control of the household and its businesses. He was just trying to scare me into submission. Qian clenched his fists, the veins on his forehead bulging. He was clearly on the verge of exploding, but was trying to restrain himself. He closed his eyes, as if making a great compromise and sacrifice. He opened them, his clenched fists relaxing. He said sorrowfully, "Fine. As long as you are willing to give up Qifeng's position as heir, I will spend at least 10 nights a month with you. How about that?" "What?" I was shocked, thinking I had misheard. "What did you say?" "Say that again." "You are still not satisfied. Yishi, I married you because it was my grandmother's and mother's idea. Not because I wanted to. My heart belongs only to Shinner, and I promised her she would be my only wife. Now, both she and I are willing to make a concession and give you 10 nights a month. This is the absolute most we can offer." I laughed in exasperation. I couldn't be bothered to waste any more words on him. Without another word, I took out the divorce decree, stamped with the Empress's seal, and presented it to him. Seeing the divorce papers, Qian's face twisted into a sneer. "A divorce, Yishi. Stop playing hard to get. 10 nights is the most I can offer. Don't push your luck." I gave a cold laugh. Listening to this man's nonsense was making me feel like I might catch his stupidity. Gigi, show him out." Gigi and a few other maids in my room moved forward and physically escorted him out. They also carried out all the management tokens, keys, ledgers, and other items and moved them to his study. Qian was utterly shocked and incredulous. "What are you doing?" "I am the Marquis, the master of this house. How dare you treat me like this? I'll have you all sold off. Let go of me." Despite having served in the army for over a decade, Qian had not developed a strong physique. In his early 30s, he was already starting to get a middle-aged paunch. My maids and guards had no trouble carrying him out. This man, Qian, from head to toe, from his appearance to his character, had not a single quality I could admire. In fact, I found him deeply repulsive, and I had been nominally married to such a man for 15 years. It was a stain on my life. The next morning, I instructed the maids and servants in my courtyard to start moving my belongings out of the mansion. In consideration of the fact that I had used the status of the Marquise's wife for 15 years to build connections and help my brother's business flourish, I was willing to leave the mansion with a final shred of dignity. I would leave behind all the money I had earned for the mansion over the past decade. If the members of the mansion refrained from causing me any more trouble, I would turn a blind eye and let the Yi family continue to support their businesses. After all, my son still held the title of the Marquise's heir, and the mansion needed to maintain some semblance of respectability. When I first married into the mansion, it was deeply in debt. The operating rights to almost all its businesses had been mortgaged, and the family owed over 1,000,000 taels to outsiders. If not for the fact that those properties were ancestral gifts from the emperor and couldn't be sold, they would have long been gone. Before I arrived, the entire mansion couldn't even afford its meals and was several months behind on paying its servants. After I married in, I had to use my dowry not only to redeem the business rights, but also to pay off the massive debts. Of course, I wouldn't just throw my money away. Through a series of maneuvers, the mansion's debts were transferred to the Yi family. On the surface, I was managing their businesses, and the profits were returned to the mansion's treasury. But in reality, the so-called profits were just the difference between buying goods at a low price from the Yi family's upstream suppliers and selling them in the mansion's shops. If I wanted to, I could cut off the entire mansion's income in an instant. When the members of the mansion saw me moving my things out in such a grand fashion, they were stunned. They all came out saying I could leave, but my things had to stay. They blocked me for a long time, until I produced the divorce decree with the Empress's seal. Then, one by one, they reluctantly stepped aside and let me leave. After leaving the mansion, my daughter and I moved into the princess's residence that my brother had purchased for her. Before my son left for Hengshan Academy, the three of us went to a temple to pray for blessings. On the way, we were ambushed by bandits. They were ruthless, clearly intending to kill us all. Our guards fought with them for a short time before a passing general and his troops captured all the bandits. The general was handsome and heroic, and he looked at me with a rather intense gaze. He volunteered to escort us up the mountain. My son took a great liking to him, and the two of them chatted and laughed all the way, getting along splendidly. An outsider might have thought they were father and son. Later, it was discovered that the bandits had been hired by the Marquis of Yongkang. They were resentful that my son held the heir's title, blocking the illegitimate son's path to inheriting the marquisate. If my son died, the title would go to the illegitimate son. If my daughter died, her princess's residence and all the gold and silver bestowed by the palace would belong to the mansion. And they wanted me dead simply because they didn't like me. Qian was thrown into prison, sentenced to life imprisonment, and stripped of his title as the Marquis of Yongchang. My son Qifeng became the new Marquis of Yongchang. Qian was unwilling to accept this and demanded to see me. In consideration of the fact that my son had gained the title, I decided to grant him this one meeting. In the prison, he first demanded that I find a way to get him out. He knew I had the means. I did, but I had no intention of saving him. He had tried to have my son killed. Releasing him would only endanger my son further. His eyes blazing with hatred, he asked me why I was so heartless. Since I had married him, Why couldn't I just be a dutiful wife and be good to him and his family? Since my Yi family was so wealthy, why couldn't we just give our money to the mansion? Why was I willing to donate my dowry to charity but not give it to the mansion? Even when I helped the mansion, why did I insist on having the Yi family hold their debts, keeping them on a leash? Why were the Yi family, and I so cordial to everyone else, but so cold to the Marquise's family? Weren't we family by marriage? Why would I treat them this way? I smiled, deciding to let him understand the truth while he rotted in prison. After the grand dame of the Marquise's household proposed the marriage in the South, my brother and I personally went to the capital and thoroughly investigated the history of the mansion and the life of the young Marquis I was to marry. I tailed Qian and saw him meeting with Lu Xin, and I overheard their conspiracy. That day, the spring breeze was gentle, and the willows were like smoke. Qian and Lu Xin, a pair of devoted lovers, were hidden under the cascading willows by the lake, whispering sweet nothings. Lu Xin lamented, "The thought of Brother Yan marrying another woman makes my heart feel like it is being pricked by 1,000 needles." Qian grasped her hands tightly, his expression emotional. "Xin'er, you are the only love of my life. My feelings for you are witnessed by heaven and earth. The only reason I am marrying that merchant's daughter is because of her large dowry and her skill in business. She can fill the mansion's coffers and turn our businesses profitable. That way, our future children will have a substantial inheritance." At this, Qian reached out and stroked Lu Xin's still slender waist and abdomen, his gaze gentle and affectionate. My grandfather's and father's generations were extravagant and achieved little. The mansion is now just an empty shell. My father has passed. My grandmother is old. My mother is frail. And I have an unmarried sister to provide for. With a group of old and weak women and failing businesses. If you were to marry into the mansion now, you would only suffer with me. But don't worry, Xin'er. I have no feelings for her. She is just a tool. Tomorrow, on our wedding night, I will remain faithful to you and will not touch her. I will only stay in her room for half the night to make it seem like we have consummated the marriage. That way, even if she cannot bear the hardships of the mansion later, she won't be able to easily annul the marriage and remarry. I have used all the mansion's money to bribe the necessary officials, and the day after tomorrow, I will leave with the army to earn military merits at the border. I have already bought a house in a border city. You will come with me. We will have children there and live a blissful life. When I have earned enough merit and return to the capital, I will make you my equal wife, and our children will be honored as legitimate heirs. In the future, if that merchant's daughter knows her place and behaves, taking good care of the mansion, there will still be a place for her. If she dares to be resentful, a letter of divorce would be a small matter. If she displeases me, I can make her fall ill. There are plenty of official wives who have died of illness in the capital's backyards. Then, you, Xin'er, will be the sole mistress of the mansion. The future of the marquisate must be inherited by our children. Tears streamed down Lu Xin's face. Brother Yan, my life has always been hard. Born illegitimate, I suffered at the hands of my stepmother and legitimate siblings. Life has been a struggle. I swore to myself that I would never be a concubine. But then I met you. I truly love you, Brother Yan. So I can ignore my reputation, get pregnant out of wedlock, and am willing to elope with you. You must never betray me. Brother Yan, please don't let me lose. Qian caressed Lu Xin's delicate face, his eyes filled with pity. Xin'er, I will never betray you in this life. Not only will I not betray you, but I will also give you the honor and wealth that the wife of a marquis deserves. Trust me, Xin'er. Lu Xin threw herself into his arms. If that can be, then I will have no regrets in this life. The two lovers were emotional, as if their future of wealth and honor was already within their grasp. They embraced passionately, and as their feelings intensified, the sound of their kisses echoed from the willow grove. I was boating on the lake, hidden among the dense lotus leaves, a few willows separating us. I had been listening to their secrets all morning. At the time, I had even sighed. What a pair of devoted lovers, their love as strong as gold. The man, for the sake of his family's honor and for his beloved woman and child, was willing to sacrifice himself to marry a woman he didn't love. The woman, for the man, disregarded worldly shame and her own reputation, getting pregnant out of wedlock and eloping to be his mistress. How moving. Of course, if I hadn't been the foolish merchant's daughter they were planning to officially marry and exploit, I would have applauded their love. But since I was the one being schemed against, I felt no anger or resentment. Instead, my eyes gleamed with excitement. A vast marquise's mansion, with only a group of old, weak, and incompetent women, and a husband who wouldn't be home. With no man in charge, wouldn't the entire mansion be mine to control, to flex my muscles, to usurp the magpie's nest? The marquise's family was unjust, scheming against me first. They couldn't blame me for playing along and being unrighteous in return. The future of the marquise's mansion would be mine for the taking. In this marriage, everyone had ulterior motives. No one could blame the other for being more ruthless. On our wedding night in the bridal chamber, after drinking the ceremonial wine, Qi Yan, on the pretext of leaving for battle the next day and needing rest, refused to consummate the marriage and urged me to sleep early. I smiled sweetly and said, "All right," then slowly undressed in front of him. Qian's gaze grew increasingly sticky. Within moments, he lost control, walked over, and pushed me onto the bed. I curved my lips into a smile, waved my hand, and the candles in the room were extinguished, plunging us into darkness. Qian had been worried the ceremonial wine was drugged with an aphrodisiac, and had secretly poured it into his sleeve, thinking I didn't know. But while he avoided the wine, he couldn't avoid the colorless, odorless aphrodisiac incense burning in the room. Of course, I had no interest in this man, so I would not truly consummate the marriage with him. The one who spent the night with him was a famous courtesan from the south whose first night I had bought at a high price. As for me, I changed into a maid's attire, slipped past the mansion's servants, and went to the room where my dowry was stored, guarded by my own Yi family members. There, I spent my wedding night with my true love. Beforehand, I had taken a specially prepared conception-aiding potion. It was a recipe my Yi family had spent a fortune to obtain. It was said to be 100% effective. The next day, Qian woke up naked in my bed, seeing me disheveled and smiling at him, his eyes filled with disbelief and regret. I called him husband in a sweet voice. He was instantly filled with remorse and fled the room. The mansion's matron came with a sour face to collect the blood-stained consummation cloth, duly recording it in the mansion's registry of marital activities. In the backyards of the capital's noble families, with their many wives and concubines, the more prestigious the family, the more detailed their records were, to ensure the purity of the bloodline. The day after the wedding, my husband, just as he had planned, left the mess of the mansion to me and went off to war. I went to the city gates to see him off. My eyes filled with tears, playing the part of a reluctant new bride perfectly. Qian put on a show of giving me some advice, which was nothing more than telling me to be filial to my elders. Care for the young and manage the mansion's businesses. I nodded repeatedly, telling him to go without worry, that he need not concern himself with the mansion anymore. Worrying would be useless, because the mansion would soon become my stepping stone. Later, after 10 months of pregnancy, just before giving birth, I had my brother prepare 2 infants, a boy and a girl. I needed a son to secure my position in the mansion, but a daughter would be more convenient for attending banquets and socializing. The daughter was my sister-in-law's, and the son was adopted from a branch of the Yi family. As it turned out, I gave birth to a son. My sister-in-law's daughter stayed, and together with my son, they became a pair of fraternal twins. As for my son's father, he was one of my guards back then, born a slave. The vast difference in our status meant my family would never approve our marriage. After our son was born, I sponsored him to join the army at the border. He and my son looked too much alike. Keeping him around would have surely raised suspicions. Qi Yan, a good-for-nothing young master, could become a titular general after 15 years at the border. Mi Guard, who was already a skilled martial artist, was ambitious and brave, with Mai and the Yi family's financial backing and support. By the time the army returned victorious, he was already a great general, covered in glory and fame. After I finished telling him everything, Qian's veins bulged with fury, but he was powerless. They had planned to exploit my Yi family, but in the end, we had usurped their nest, and their mansion had become a stepping stone for the Yi family's rise. Who was to blame? They could only blame their own wicked intentions for letting the wolf into the house. Did they really think the Yi family's money was so easy to take? I told him that if my son passed the imperial examinations and made a name for himself, the title of Marquis of Yongchang would be returned to Qi Yan's illegitimate son. As long as he and the rest of the mansion behaved and stopped causing trouble for me and the Yi family, they could maintain a basic standard of living. They would never be rich and famous again, but at least they would have food, clothing, and shelter. But if they continued to cause trouble, my son would drive every last member of the Qi family out of the mansion. After all, my son was now the Marquis of Yongchang, the true master of the house. The survival of the entire Qi family now depended on my and the Yi family's attitude. After saying this, I left. I never saw Qi Yan or any member of the Qi family again after that. They never came looking for trouble, and we lived our separate lives peacefully in the capital. Later, my son placed first in the imperial examinations. After making several contributions to the dynasty, he petitioned the emperor to establish his own household. The emperor granted his wish and even bestowed upon him a new surname. Coincidentally, it was the same as his biological father's. The title of Marquis of Yongchang was returned to Qi Yan's illegitimate son, which also secured Qi Yan's release from prison. But the new Marquis of Yongchang was mediocre. His years as an illegitimate son had ruined his reputation. Without the Yi family's support, the Marquis's mansion couldn't even afford servants, and was left with nothing but an empty title. Qi Yan and his equal wives never got the wealth and glory they desired. Instead, they grew to resent each other, each feeling that the other had ruined their life. As for me, I remarried my great general. We later had another son and daughter. The general was very good to me and never took a concubine or mistress in his life.